going to start off by letting the panel introduce themselves. The title of our panel is When, Not If, China Will Be the World's #1 Music Market. But before we get into it and unpack it, we have Gavin Parry from Sony Music, Denis Ladegaillerie from Believe, got it?
Perfect.
Professor Grace from Communication University in Beijing, and Calvin Wong from World No.1 Music. If you guys want to spend 30 seconds, just talk about yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, okay, so I'm Gavin Parry. I'm the Executive Vice President of Digital and Business Development for Asia Pacific for Sony Music. I've been in that role now for around 7 or 8 years and been in the music industry for almost 20.
And I'm the CEO and founder of Believe, and Believe operates 2 services, Believe and TuneCore, and we've been present here in Asia since 2012.
I just talked about myself, introduced myself before, and I just want to say my university is really is a top 1 for media university in whole China, and our group every year we release music industry report for government and for industry, and we do want to find some partner who can cooperate with us, can translate that music report. Thank you.
Since we talk about China, my first experience in China as a marketing person was way back in 1994. Some of you may not be born yet. When Roxette went to China for the first Western concert after Wham 10 years ago. So that was my first true experience of China and how the Western music goes into China. So yeah, long time ago. I still remember, so I'm thankful.
Okay, so as I said, the premise of this panel is when, not if, China will be the #1 market. And firstly, we have to, as Grace, as you said in your presentation, you have to acknowledge the pretty stunning turnaround that's happened in China over the past 5 to 10 years. You went from a 99.99% piracy market to one that's really starting to boom. So that's a given. And clearly platforms like Tencent, Baidu, Alibaba, NetEase and what have you have been instrumental in that. So again, we acknowledge that. What I'm curious to do is to unpack that statement a little bit, because it's not 100% clear what that means. What does #1 mean? So are we talking about, are we talking about recorded music? That's the traditional way that the business measures the size of the business. Or are we talking about, and in the context of being a #1 market, are we talking about the wider music business? And I want to reference a Bloomberg article from about this time last year. And it said, overseas revenue from CDs, concert tickets, streaming music, related merchandise, and other cultural services was $4.7 billion US outside Korea. So that's 10 times the recorded music size in Korea. So I wanted to reference that, because is that what we're talking about here with China? Because China's a much more complex, much more interesting market than just a recorded music / streaming music market. So my question to you then is, to each of you, is when we talk about that, what are the key components, do you think, of China making its way up the league ladder, if you like, towards that top spot? Anyone care to start?
I think as in any market, I've been fortunate enough to be in the Asia region for so long. You have to understand that markets go through a phase of evolution, not revolution, as in the case now with everyone jumping into China and say, I want to do this, I want to do that, and with the big statement like, world #1 music market. I think when you look at any business, especially right now with music, the music business is about consumption, right? When it's being consumed by 1.4 billion or whatever the population now in China, that's a huge amount of people consuming music. So from that perspective alone, it's already the biggest. But obviously that you can measure it by, numbers and whatever not, and the various sectors that would benefit out of it.
Yeah.
And then you look at the domestic business, the regional business, and the international business that will all benefit from it. So it is important to create a foundation for any music industry to grow, to flourish. And that is what we as the music industry, we need to build that foundation, whether it's rights protection, whether to have the expertise to really manage a business in the right way and grow it in a very steady and sustainable growth path, and not just go out there and just say, oh, we're going to send in 10 artists and we're going to invest in this money and that money, but to build that foundation. And right now, from Warner perspective, we're very happy to see that foundation is being built. Some of our partners here have been very, very accommodating in helping to build those foundations. And I think that is the most important thing. If those foundations are built in a long term, it will be a number one just from the sheer size of population of people consuming music. But if the foundation is not built right, then it could fall, and people can say, oh yeah, music is being consumed so much in China, but nobody's making the money. So artists don't make the money, the labels don't make the money, the partners don't make the money, then all this talk is just nonsense.
Right.
So to me, I think focus on the foundation, build a sustainable market that can grow at the right pace, at the right time, bringing the expertise into China, the know-how that we have done elsewhere in the world, and build from there. And then in no time, there will be enough for everyone. That's my...
Because we have been talking about that 1.3 billion, people trot that out all the time, right? There's 1.3 billion people, so therefore if you multiply that by this, you get that. I mean, at the moment, it's still a little bit illusory. I mean,
it's still a long way to go.
Right.
Because like you see different markets at a different growth rate, Some markets like the Scandinavians, they are very mature in the streaming world. China is still in the evolution, the early evolution, and our partners understand that, and they want to get more people on board, but they got to do it strategically to understand how to accommodate the market and build that sustainable business over a long period of time, and not just like, oh, okay, that's how it's being done in the Scandinavian, so we got to do it the same way. It's got to have different strategies, and we're happy with what we're seeing, and we want that to be a sustainable and continuous growth in the marketplace.
Okay. Dennis?
What I would add is, Believe is present in about 50 countries around the world, so I travel a lot, see a lot of different markets. What's really interesting about China is one of the things to build the foundation is the understanding that what will create value for recorded music is paid subscription. And I think one of the things that China has done remarkably well, and I think very much driven by the leadership of Tencent on this issue, is understand very early on, I think the management team at Tencent understood very early on that paid subscription was the way of the future, and actually started working 4 or 5 years ago towards building a market that was a paid subscription market. So what we're starting to see today is that work, that education with the ecosystem on building up the subscription model, executing the technology, executing the customer acquisition, that's now starting to show some results. And then if you apply this to the size of a population, yes, it builds big numbers quickly. What's very interesting, the comforting thing in how you build the foundation is when you look at how the adoption of paid subscription around the world, and when you look at the markets that have entered paid subscription, the difference between the slowest adopting market and the fastest adopting market over a 12-year period of time, if you look at Scandinavia, is only 2 years. And all of the countries take exactly the same path, which is technically 1% to 4% of your population year over year that will adopt paid subscription. So if you look at this, project the numbers, you have a market, recorded music market in China, that is probably 6-7 years down the road in terms of number of paid subscription. For recorded music, probably the largest music market in the world. But I think it's essential to say that that foundation is based on the understanding of the ecosystem of that's where the ecosystem needs to go. And I think once you've built a music ecosystem, you start building a source of revenues. Once you have a source of revenues, it means more revenues for artists. You can start building up all of the components of the ecosystem. Management companies, you can invest into live music. It starts generating publishing revenues, and so you can build the publishing expertise, and the wheel feed itself, and progressively all of the components of the system work together to build a very large ecosystem.
Okay. So, Grace, I was really interested in your presentation before, and it touched on some of the things that Denis is saying, which is about the music ecosystem and the sort of ability of consumers to understand about paying for music, for example. So I think one of your comments was that there's still some way to go in the sort of music education process, if you like, to get Chinese consumers mentally around paying for music. What's your thinking on that?
Yes, but I think that will need long time to change that situation. But that is really worth to invest on education to make people have a sense to pay to music, to respect music. Also, when we're talking about the top 1 music, I still feel. I partly agree, but I still have my own opinion.
Only partly.
Yeah, yeah. Because in China, every coin have 2 sides in China. When you talk about China, our market is really, really bad. Like several years ago, even 30 years ago, people selling piracy music CD. So that is also an advantage to us. Like when you read that data, the download, it never affects Chinese market. And like CD physical, it's even doesn't. So that is what I want to mean for China. We was born in different market, and that is a time for us. It's easier for us can go to different way. Like for example, sound exchange in United States, when they have that in digital area. And the administrative fee is just about 4.6, like maybe last year. It's much lower than ASCAP and the BMI. Why? Because they was born in digital area. They don't need to change a lot. Because when you born in different area, you need to, okay, this is your profit. I may hurting your benefit. So that will be something like that. Also, like law, regulation. We have a law based on we borrow a lot of ideas from United States and Japan, and then we combine them really fit for Chinese market. So many things. What I think, even we are really behind. We just have a music copyright law 1990, but it is still good news for us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Gav.
Yeah, look, while it's good to actually look at the larger picture in terms of the market, I think it's also good just to look at the recorded music piece as well, to see where we're at and where are we at right now.
It's definitely an indicator.
It's a great indicator, and at the end of the day, it also drives a lot of the ancillary businesses that run off, having hits and having stars. So I think if you look at where we're at now, China's sitting there, I think at 10th with around about 300 million. It was, I think, the 2017 estimate. France is around about $1 billion, sitting at number 5. So that's the next. I think that's the next target. And I think what we can record back is that the paid subscriber chart, which we're looking at every month, it's moving in a really steady and nice progression. Okay. It's going in the right way, and you would think that somewhere around the 50 to 70 million subscribers, China is a top 5 market.
And what are we at now?
We're at, I think, somewhere over the 25, right. 25 plus, depending on how we put that together. But we have got a long way to go, and I think Grace, in her excellent presentation, and thank you for the map on Australia with the kangaroos, by the way. That was nice to just remind of the remoteness. But your math there showed a very exciting future for China. And I think, we're happy to report that, it's all heading in the right direction, and that's down to a lot of the work being done as the industry and also by Tencent in making sure that, the paid model is attractive. And by moving certain content into the paid model only is quite a unique thing. We don't do this in a lot of places. In fact, it's not done in the rest of the world. But in China, that's the model that we're using, and, it's working. So I think, the next 3 to 4 years, really exciting times for that paid subscription model.
So the paid model, as we all know, was essentially shoehorned into the market by Tencent and the other platforms to everyone's benefit, to the market's benefit. And that's why we're sitting here talking about a growth path up to wherever it goes. So just focusing on streaming for a second, and this is not meant to be controversial in any way, but it's just a fact of life. A senior executive said to me as I was researching this, he said, the biggest challenge for the market is that free is too good, and we need to find a way to gradually move the big free chunk of the market into paying. I mean, that's pretty self-evident, obviously.
Yep.
But what's the panel's feeling on that? And what's the process of ratcheting that up so that to use your slide, Grace, to move from, I think it was 3% to the 44%, where Spotify is. So that's one end of the scale and that's the other end of the scale. So how do you do that?
I think it's just got to be done in a very careful and deliberate way, that you're also not, scaring off the market as well. You've got a huge consumer base there that you want to keep engaged. You want to keep them, using the service on a monthly basis. So, we're talking in the 700-800 million mark across China. So how do you keep them engaged and then slowly give them opportunities to get a better service in the paid model? Do we want to go to a full sort of Western type model in the free service right now? I don't think that the answer is no. We want to make sure that we can just slowly picking people up and not losing anybody else, because the last thing we want to do is move things back to a pirated world. We want to make sure that we've got a legal service that everybody's using.
So the natural question is there a danger if we screw this up? Is there a danger that we could go backwards? Or are we on that path now? That's an inevitable path.
I think we're on a very healthy path right now. Very healthy.
Okay.
Yeah, we've never seen any markets. Sorry, we've never seen any markets go backwards. I mean, you can look at some of the worst pirated market. France was one of them at some point in time. Russia was one of them. All of them have been growing very steadily, and what you see is you can almost draw a straight line of growth all across the world that's very similar. And so the question is, how quickly faster are you going than the average or slower depends on a couple of things. It does depend on one point that's very important. It's the legal environment.
Right.
If you have a legal environment that's more stringent, if you look at Sweden, one of the most advanced markets in the world, what accelerated Sweden is the passing of a law that was very stringent and actually went after pirates. And then you saw one day to the next, the legal market increased 40% almost overnight. So the legal environment is very important, having a government that understands that protecting copyright is important. And then the dynamism of the streaming services and how they understand what service pricing balance they need to make and how to promote music so that the user perceives a higher value and it creates willingness to pay is another component. And it's where you have to do essentially trial and errors, not to go too fast about cutting too quickly from free to paid and finding the right pace. And I think it's just sophisticated players just looking at the good thing it's digital, so you can look at all your usage data and adjust what features you want. Is offline download so that you can listen when you're not online, and important features from free to paid, et cetera, to drive that line.
So is the model in China going to evolve in its own way, do you think? Are there characteristics of what's happening at the moment that are, you know, that are setting it apart from other markets where it's developing its own characteristics, its own, you know, model pieces?
By using content to improve the paid tier, by moving content only into the paid tier, that's very unique. And I think you've also got the situation as well where it's a highly mobile country as well. So you don't have that luxury of being able to have a PC option that's actually going to have any sort of material take-up.
Yeah. Calvin, from a marketing point of view, do you see any differences in how the China market's evolving?
Yeah, I mean, there are more artists going to China, yeah, because I'm not really an expert in this thing. I have Andy Mines, Simon Robson, who should be talking about these things. They are the expert. I'm more focusing on the marketing side. So, as far as China is concerned, we want to bring more artists outside of China, and we want to bring more outside artists into China. It's very viable now, thanks to the development in China, and we're working with our partners to try and break some artists. And 2 years ago, we're still committed to breaking Christopher from Denmark in China. He has 8 #1s on CUC, but literally unknown elsewhere in the world. And now we're breaking Christopher outside of China into the Southeast Asia market. So we think it's a market that is very hungry for content and very hungry for fresh content. Veronica could be a very exciting proposition for China. And we had a chat earlier on about what she needs to do in China to be able to get her started, her career in China. And people are very open-minded right now in China in terms of the types of music that they are accepting. And that's very exciting for me as a marketer, as a music lover as well, to see China can take in hip-hop. They still don't understand it, personally speaking, but they're embracing it. That's the good thing, and it would take time for them to learn the whole hip-hop thing. Right now, it's all about style and, the whole glamour of it, and it's fresh music. And yeah, various genres. Linkin Park, Rob McDermott and I worked for many years in China, and we broke China, and people in the know would tell you that China is Linkin Park's biggest market, and still is, even up to today. Mike Shinoda just went over to China and do a tour. So it's a super exciting, huge market for artists.
So let me take that the other way around, which is Chinese artists breaking outside China. And look, in every local market, that's the dream, right? You want to be able to break outside your own market, and ideally globally. So are we starting to see that?
That is happening right now in full tilt. I'm sure you read about Chris Wu signing to Universal. Jackson Wang is now doing deals, partnering with a lot of our artists as well and doing collaborations. So TRA, for example, right now is starting to break, and of course for us, our biggest success was Li Ronghao. And Li Ronghao is a Chinese artist. Now he's a mega superstar in the Chinese community. So as far as Warner, and this is I'm being very proud that the Warner team has been very, very successful in bringing a lot of China artists from way back when of Naing, for example, outside of China, and that has always been our commitment. And I think this is going to be even more and more in the coming years. And it's very exciting because the China talent is, because they're accepting so many different kind of music. Yeah. So the freshness of the talent that come out of China is actually quite exciting. And it suddenly felt like Taiwanese artists and Hong Kong artists has become more stale. And that is very, very good to see from a creative music and talent perspective. So we are definitely investing in a lot of different genres, and hopefully as a global company, we want to bring them out of China,
So what's the comparison between the way that that's happening in China and the way that it has been happening in, for example, Korea? Right, Korea is the big success story in terms of international success, and the Koreans were very focused, and it's very much about. There seemed to be a strategy there, almost from day one. What's the view from China?
It's the whole environment. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be involved even in the first Korean wave, because I think I was at the Mnet Awards, Mama Awards, talking about this. You know, when I first signed Rain outside of Korea, I was so excited because he was like this super amazing guy that sings and dances and is hot, you know, to other people. And I wanted to break him outside of Korea. And that was so exciting to see, but of course I failed because, you know, just by doing it, it won't happen because it's not so easy. And then the second album, he decided, in between the first and the second album, he went and do a drama series called Full House. And that drama series broke all over Asia. And the second album was when he became a massive regional superstar. Yeah. So there's a lot of factors involved in breaking an artist outside of their own market, you know. And Korea took a long time because it was not just music, it was the movies, it was the drama series, it was the culture, you know. It was the Samsung and all these LG brands becoming global, all happening at the same time, you know. It may take those things for China to happen, but there are signs there that some of these are happening already. Right. So like what Chris Wu is doing, you know, what Jackson Wang is doing, what we have seen with Lee Rong Ha was amazing, and we see that potential of how that can happen. But please approach with caution because, like I said, you can't just say, tomorrow I'm going to sign an artist and I'm going to make him a big global superstar, because you need an entire engine of called culture to move along with you. And K-pop has gone through so many, you know, waves. And when was the first time Rain came out with the first album? It was close to what, 15, 16 years ago? Yeah. You know? Only now you see BTS exploding in America, you know? So, and that's because of another factor as well, which is, you know, the other streaming services that decided to support artists outside of their home environment. So
there's a big difference, though, between taking artists out of China into the region and taking artists out of China into the international markets, right?
The big difference, though, sorry to interrupt.
No, please, yeah.
The big difference is China is self-sustained. When you have a 1.4 billion, do you really want to care? And do you have time?
So that's sort of the question.
Get out of China? You're like, dude, I got enough time. I got enough money in China to do it in China. Yeah. I don't need to get out. Some of them do. Yeah. Some of them have a bigger ambition. They want to become a global superstar, as you know, Chris Wu and Jackson Wang and all these people. You know, some of them say, you know what, China is enough for me. Yeah. You know, like back in the day. Remember back in the day when Japan? Yeah. Those artists don't care outside of Japan. It's too big in Japan already. Yeah. So there could be a mixture of that. Korea is different. Korea is a small population country. They have to get out. So, and they're very good because they become very, very good at what they are doing. They're world standard in creating idol groups. You know
it's a huge point. They're actually so good at what they do now. The quality of the music and the quality of the studio.
That's part of the strategy, isn't it?
Well, to Grace's point, I think she mentioned 80 million people are being educated in music in China. So you've got to think that that's going to all come through, and you're going to get quality production facilities, quality studios. Yep. And that's all going to pay off in a few years' time.
Yeah, and some of those factors that you talked about, Calvin, about Samsung and LG and all of the stuff happening, you can see it happening in China, right, with the technology companies.
Yeah, definitely. You can see we don't have a Huawei like LG before, but now we have technology, we have a population. Korea just have 50 million, and we have a 1.4 billion, then that is different. We do care about outside market. That's not just for market. It's for idea, it's for social, it's for culture. So we want people to know Chinese culture, but it's not just for money, for market.
But the point that is very important is you got to be very unique and very good at what you're doing. And you, as you know, I think Gavin, you and I see the same thing. You got to be world standard. Yeah. You know, and the K-pop, you know, I have instances where actually when one of our labels decided to come up with a boy band, I say, have you seen what they're doing in Korea? And you give me this kind of crap video, you know? So, but, you know, that's what it is. They have created themselves this niche that is so difficult to emulate by other people.
Yeah.
So for China to be able to have that kind of same thing, you got to find that niche as well. And it's not easy. You know, it took them, what, 15 years, 16 years, and the 3 big labels there has been consistently doing it in a very, very
systematic way.
Systematic and fantastically well, you know?
And Calvin, it's also up to us as labels to actually make sure we're investing and looking at the bigger picture.
Right.
I think
it's a big engine.
What's
it's
going
a big
on,
engine that requires, you know, certain movers and shakers to make it happen. Hopefully Warner can be part of it.
Yeah, but you know, it only takes one, right? It takes one to really break, and that tends to incentivize and inspire others to do the same thing.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think it's tied also to the beginning of the story, which is what we see in a lot of markets. If you took a look at a lot of markets around the world, digitally, 10 years ago, they were, the music industry wasn't doing well. Most of the markets were crumbling. So if you look at hip-hop, 5 years ago, in a lot of markets, hip-hop didn't exist as much as big as it is today. And what happened, a new generation of artists came in, they perfectly understood how to build new audiences, how to develop themselves. And what did they do? They started getting better at producing music. They started getting better at producing music videos. And the market grew. That meant more money. More money coming into the market mean even more expensive music videos coming in. And then you come to a point where you have a big first, where you have 1 or 2 examples. You now have 10, 20, 30 artists that have become really big artists that didn't exist 3 years ago. And out of them, you have a few of them that start thinking, well, I'm now big in one country, what can I do next? Well, and then next is outside. Yeah. So the level of ambition raised, which is why, as you will see the ecosystem of artists in China build, you will see more and more artists developing, more and more investment and people's skills getting into more and more quality production, and you will see more and more artists go outside of China in a world, as we said, that a lot of things that's making things easier is technology. The music is not available. You don't have to manufacture CDs. You don't have to ship CDs all around. It makes development much easier, and with global services, music travels faster through playlisting, through algorithm. Your ability to make the content available in front of Chinese citizens outside of China is very significant, and you can build up and accelerate and do all of the investments that record labels, management companies need to make to accelerate and press upon the ambition of these artists.
Yeah. So we've got 7 minutes. I want to flip it around a little bit and talk about international artists coming into China. And you know, in any market where there's a significant proportion of the market which is domestic, local, you know, it's always a challenge, and Asia is particularly that way. Again, you know, doing research for this, there was a couple of stories that I came across, one in the China Daily, one in FT, basically saying the same thing, which was, you know, Western artists starting to eye, you know, to look at the attractiveness of the China market and trying to break in. So I'm interested in your thoughts about this, but I'm also interested in, and particularly from the three of you who are sort of at the coalface of this, how difficult it is still for international artists to get a foothold in this market. And indies as well. You know, if you want to talk about indies, Denis, as well, and you know, the role of independence in a market like China, that'd be very interesting.
I think it's the same thing as we just discussed for export, which is any market around the world that you want to get into as an artist. Our belief is you need to do the same thing you've done in your domestic market. You need to focus, go there, play, have a partner locally that will help you work with Tencent, expose the tracks, expose the music videos, do all the work that you need to do in parallel, and not just once, but once,
continuously.
twice, 3 times, 10 times, 50 times. It's like anything.
Like
You've
any
got
market.
to go build these audiences, engage in a dialogue, in a digital dialogue, in a real life dialogue, through gigs, through a lot of things to start building the presence. And there's really no shortcut. The overnight success where you've got one track that picks up, that happens once in a lifetime.
Sure, but that's not sustainable, is it? You know,
Exactly.
you can be a big international artist and have, you know, a hit in China, but that doesn't make you, it doesn't break you in China.
Exactly, and which is, first it has to be, whether you're an indie or major, it has to be the ambition of the artist, because you are going to need a really high level of investment from the artist, and then putting the resources locally and have the partners locally to help you scale the skills, the teams to help you develop these artists.
Yeah. Gav?
Yeah, well, you know, I think probably the best example we have at the moment is Alan Walker.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was a real commitment to the market. So he came into the market, I think, 16 plus times. You know, that's extraordinary, really, when we struggle with some artists to get them in there once. And they just had a really great plan. You know, it was all about understanding, not just, you know, repurposing the marketing tools that they were using in the West, but repurposing them for China.
Yeah.
You know, looking at the Chinese calendar, making sure that they were doing things relevant. You know, they worked really closely with Tencent to get their music integrated into games. And Gunner's going to be here on Wednesday afternoon, and it's a great story if you've got time to listen to Gunner talk about how he got Alan Walker to be where he is now. And just to finish off, you know, recently he's been doing a number of collaborations. In fact, just last week we released a collaboration with Lay. So, and that's sitting, I think, in the top 5 on CUC at the moment. So there's you know, you've got to commit, as Denis said, you've just got to commit, you've got to go. Yeah. But you've also got to have a really good plan, and you've got to work with local partners.
Yeah, Warner is slightly different. We've done a lot of that in the past, and we felt like now we need to embrace a slightly different strategy because we have so many international artists. Yeah. So so we have a multi-tier strategy to ensure our entire artist roster, as much as we can, physically can, get its right representation in China. So obviously you have the Alan Walkers, for us would be the David Guettas, the Charlie Puth, and then you have another tier where you identify the acts that is Denis said, willing to commit the time and resources to come to China. But also the third part to me is even more important. As a music lover, I want as many people in China to listen to as many different kind of music as possible. If you look at analysis right now, it's very focused to a few international artists. If you look at the charts, Alan Walker will occupy 4 or 5 positions in the charts in the top 30 and so on. And then Charlie Puth will occupy 3, and Ed Sheeran will occupy another 5. And there's not enough variety. So the third part is where I think we want to focus on, because, you know, we felt like, as I said before, China can accept a lot more music. And this is where we are continuing working with our partners to find ways how to expose that in a very systematic way, so people can be educated in different forms of music, whether it's hip hop, whether it's rock, whether it's dance, and so on and so forth. So that to me is our strategy of really trying to educate the Chinese music with as much music as possible, so that our international signings get its fair representation in China, in being given the opportunity to have a chance. And all you need is something to spark it, and then you can accelerate those opportunities, whether it's a song that suddenly become viral through Douyin or whatever, and then you take this opportunity, like what we have with Fits and a Tantrum. Hand Clap, it came from Korea, it's now a big hit in China. So when that happens, we accelerate, we amplify it, we make it bigger. So somebody who have no idea what happened to their song suddenly have a hit song, and now our next job is to identify the hit song with the artist, and then you build artist career around it. So really that's where it becomes very, very exciting for us, because the sheer size of it. But now, how do you systematically train the consumer to be able to consume it in the right way? Right. You know, like playlisting, for example, ensuring the playlisting is done the right way, you know, so that, you know, you educate the consumer that wow, there's a lot of great international music that I can really enjoy. If I like rock, I go here. If I like, hip hop, I go here. If I like EDM, I go here. If I like pop, I go here. So those are the things that should be encouraged, and therefore, then you have a much more exciting and vibrant music market in China, which I think will happen.
Yeah.
We're seeing it, we're loving it, and with great partners, we're going to make it really work.
Yeah. And just to finish off, Grace, this was a point that you were making about creating a habit, right?
Yeah, so I agree with you this time because
thank you so much.
In China, we have 2 points. One is now more and more people they start speaking English. So that is why Chinese people they listen to more diversity music, not just focus on domestic music. That is good news. Like Japan, you said it's 90, and in China maybe just 70. And this is good news because the young kids, like my son, he just listened to English songs. He said that harmony is different, so that is his choice. That is a future potential market in China. Also, another thing is China, we are very easy to find a follower. If you mention Li Ronghao, the first, we even nobody listened to Li Ronghao in my university, and then one day, because of many your strategy, and then whole university students, they will follow Li Ronghao because of maybe one thing. I don't know, but you are this first.
We can't tell you the secret.
Okay, it's sad.
You have to sign to Warner first.
Yeah, but those what I want to mean is that we have a lot of opportunity in China in the future.
Okay, on that note, we're only a minute late. We could talk about this for hours, but we've got people winding us up. I'd like you to put your hands together, please, for Calvin, Grace, Denis, and Gavin.